Good evening and happy Monday. Welcome to the Culture Commission's State of the Union. I'm your host, Kimble, with the Financial Services Innovation Coalition and the Southern Christian Leadership Global Policy Initiative. Tonight is going to be fun, as it usually is. We've got Bill Cunningham, our economist from Creative Investment Research, and we've been talking all week. Since last week, we were talking about a whole bunch of stuff. And I said, Bill, we should just do a show because there's a lot to, people say we can't complain, but there's a lot to complain about. And Bill's going to help me express those complaints loud and clear, clearly and loudly. So, Bill, unless you have some introductions to make, I'm just going to jump in and just roll it out. So, just for the audience's edification, I sent you a list of subjects I wanted to cover tonight. First one was Black women's unemployment. Then the DBE elimination process going on around the country, the Black wealth to zero conversation of the state of Black wealth, then the new CFPB rulemaking on disparate outcomes in lending and programming, and then the Bloomberg has this charter schools to HBCU pipeline, and I want to talk about that as it relates to tonight's show is Black wealth and also re-Jim Crowing of a resegregating of America and America's youth. So, Bill, let's talk about Black women's unemployment.
Yeah. Well, there's an article, I'm going to find the link. There was an article from April in Black Enterprise. Jeff McKinney did the article where we identified back in April that 106,000 Black women had lost their jobs. That, of course, rolled up to 300,000. Now there's some white woman economist who's claiming that she was the first one to highlight that. Just like everything else we do, we can barely get credit for it. Jeff McKinney, back in April, just to be clear, Black Enterprise did the first story highlighting, based on our research and our data, that the Black female unemployment numbers seem to be spiking. Now, the reason why that's so important is because we know that Black women are the economic engine of the Black household. They have basically pulled the Black family through, even in times when Black men had a more difficult time finding work, or they had an issue with the criminal justice system. As you know, Kevin, we've calculated the economic loss due to elevated rates of Black incarceration to be, probably about $30 billion now, $30 billion per year. And the way you calculate that, just so everybody's clear, if you take the number of Black men in prison and you multiply that number by the average wage rate, that's the money they would be making if they weren't in prison, you come up with something like $25-30 billion just on an annual basis. And that's a loss to the Black community. So that's one reason why we have some of the issues that we have now. As I also said at the Congressional Black Caucus event where I went through the numbers, that's not to say that some of those brothers don't deserve to be locked up, okay? But that's a whole nother issue. Even if you were to take 50% of that number, it would still represent a huge, massive economic loss to the Black community. And that gap has been filled in somewhat by Black women. But now Black women have been targeted for reduction, or their jobs have been targeted for elimination, mainly because they're in a lot of the areas that have been impacted by this administration: government, school administration, healthcare, public service, all of the areas that are under attack. And Black women, and by extension, the Black family, have felt the brunt of that policy change. So this is another reason why, whenever somebody tells you voting doesn't matter, and it's just crazy stupid. It's crazy that fits into the narrative of people who do not have our best interest in mind.
So let me. I don't want to disrupt your thought, but I do want to add this in before we get too far past this point. There's a study that came out that said like 50% of Black mothers were single mothers, right? So if you take this Black unemployment number, add to that the fact that half of them are leading households with kids, that means half of our kids were already living on one income. Now they're living on no income. Like, and then we're going to talk about this education piece later on. Can you do any kind of calculations on what that would do in terms of undermining, the black wealth, exacerbating the black wealth problem
Oh
down the
yeah,
road?
there's no question about it. I mean, it makes the cash flow riskier and less certain.
Yeah,
And as you know, you need to have a stable cash flow in order to pay for mortgage
yeah,
and to consistently pay for all kinds of services, housing, healthcare, education, that sort of thing. So it's this idea of making that cash flow stream much more uncertain. And again, attacking black women, if you wanted to destroy the black community economically, that is exactly what you would do, specifically for the black community. Now, I don't know. I haven't seen those numbers about 50% of black households being headed by women these days. Wouldn't
single
surprise
income.
me. Would not surprise me. But clearly, with the increase in black women unemployment, obviously that's going to have a hugely negative impact
Well, then you got
on
to on top of that the affordability crisis that's affecting everybody, right? So I mean, you're talking about half of only one income, unaffordability. Now they're losing their job. I mean, like it's like a crisis. Have the numbers started to show that they started to bubble up in the numbers yet, or is that going to take a while? Lagging.
no. I mean, we've seen that certainly with respect to the black women unemployment numbers, and that's just a leading indicator. Yeah, it might take a minute for the full effect to
Yeah.
be felt by the
Yeah.
black community, but no, it's already here and it's already having a huge impact. Let me see if I can. Yeah, now I just put the link to the article in Black Enterprise from April into the chat room. And that's what we said when we looked at those numbers. We said this is bad. This is a direct result of the racist, sexist policies implemented by this administration specifically. I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost as if they are so hateful. They are
Right.
so what's the word I'm looking for? Resentful of black talent and the fact that a talented, competent black woman ran against them, that they decided they were going to take it out on all people, all humans who fit that description. So all black women. It should be illegal. There should be a way to go into courts and to at least slow down, if not reverse, some of these racist and sexist policies and actions. And long term, I think there is. If there's one ray of hope that I might be, and I hate to even bring this up because we know that our enemies will look to shut down any ray of light, any ray of hope. But the one ray of hope that we have is that the courts do seem to be beginning to stand up to this racist administration. And although, again, we've continued to face issues, as you know, we sued the Secretary of the Treasury to try to block the allocation of the IRS data to Elon Musk,
Right.
Valuing that data at 1.5 trillion, and also calculating the economic damage that it would do to the population of the U.S. But of course, we weren't successful. We weren't successful in terms of the lawsuit itself. We filed on February 4th. Right after we filed, a bunch of other groups came in and started filing lawsuits. So we take credit. We like to take credit for starting that wave, even though our particular suit wasn't successul.
But you did that pro se, right? You didn't have a lawyer. You did it pro se, correct?
Yeah, we did it pro se. Did it by myself. I won't repeat that. Saying about someone.
Well, sometimes even if you're a fool, if you're your own lawyer, you can find, and then you're the own lawyer, then you have to go where legal remedies will happen. And I hope we don't run out of time. And I don't forget. I want to circle back to that whole thing about the lawsuits, because a lot of times on the show, people will say, I get the notes like, well, we want to do more. What can we do? And it's always, you're the example of what can do. I mean, you file more amicus briefs and more suits and written more letters and comments than anybody I know. And you set a shining example for what others, people who have more resources and means than you should be doing. So I do want to circle back to that towards the end. So go ahead.
Well, but getting back to the black women unemployment rate, it has continued to increase. It is due to two factors. Again, attacking the industries where black women were overrepresented, had established themselves as professionals, incompetent professionals. And remember, that's the other part of this administration. It's only been 11 months, 12 months, That's the other thing.
That hasn't been 12 months yet. It's not even, this is just December. It hasn't even been
it hasn't even been 12 months. We know that they have a preference for incompetent people.
Yeah.
And just look at what's going on with Venezuela to confirm that, and other things that have been noted. And it's my contention that a lot of these black women were the most competent people in their companies, in their industries, and that's one reason why this administration targeted them.
Now, you said something that they were overrepresented, but they weren't truly overrepresented. They may have been less underrepresented in these spaces. They weren't overrepresented.
That's correct. I mean, they had figured out and developed a way to be properly represented, close to proportionally represented in some of these fields and in some of these industries, through sheer force of will, grit, determination. That's how they came to be in a lot of these places. And this reversal is absolutely tragic and absolutely damaging to, as I mentioned, the economic profile of the black community. These guys are trying to destroy the economic standing of the black community. That's what's going on. And the reason why you know that is because of we haven't seen this impacting other women groups, right? White women, not losing 300,000 jobs. Hispanic women, not losing 300,000 jobs. Asian women, not losing 300,000. So it's targeted, it's intentional. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, when we start to talk about the black wealth issue. Another reason, black women have been the most significant contributors to reducing the gap between black and white wealth. Mm-hmm. The most significant player, batting well above their weight class, if you will. So that's the other reason why this group has been targeted. Now, what else? What else were you thinking, Kevin?
No. As we go to that overrepresentation, you and I have to have a conversation offline. I'd love to get some data on that, because we know, for DEI, we know the black women didn't get those jobs. So I'm trying to figure out how when you say overrepresented, black women make up I guess about 8% of the population. For blacks are joined 13%.
Well, let me explain. So if you look at the representation in some of these industries with the racist and bigoted and discriminatory practices that are in place, mm-hmm. Black women shouldn't be anywhere near the level of percentage activity and participation they had in some of these industries. Yeah. They had, got more PhDs than any other group. Again, this competence, they overcame the racial discrimination, the gender discrimination barriers to participate in a lot of these industries at higher than racist discriminatory levels would lead you to believe.
So you're talking about maybe they made 1 or 2%?
Yeah. I mean, higher than even that. You say, well, 2% in some of these industries, isn't that low? No. If you look at the racist policies, they should be 1/2 of 1%. But they're actually 2%.
So it's low. It's just not as low as it could be. For instance, in where the government contracting numbers is 0.14%. If you get the 2%, even though that's a long way from 8%, it's better than you might otherwise predict. But it's still not. It's not overrepresented.
Oh yeah. No, I get you. Overrepresented to me as kind of a technician. I'm going to put another link in the chat room on the November employment situation figures showing the Black women. I got a chart there, and it shows the percentage of Black women. Am I still on?
Yep.
Or did I lose you guys?
I hear you loud and clear.
Okay, very good. Yeah, my screen froze.
Okay.
That's all.
So okay.
All right, there we go. I'm back. I'm back now.
You're still, well. We never lost you. You lost yourself. We never lost you. You were good. All right. So let's go to the next. Keeping that conversation going because we're talking about percentages. Let's go to the disadvantaged business enterprise elimination effort, which you and I talked about earlier in last week. Did you have a chance to look at any of that since we've talked?
Yeah, I mean, I'm continually looking at that situation and those numbers. Yeah. As you and I talked about, part of the issue is with this administration is their national security policy that they released, which basically hints at where they're going. They want to get, just as they wanted to increase Black women unemployment, they want to get rid of Black economic empowerment, entrepreneurship. I mean, they really are looking to limit that, not because it doesn't work, but because it works too well. As with Black women, we have come in and really made some strides that speak to our competence and our stick-to-itiveness in a lot of fields, a lot of industries. Even with no capital, no support, we've been able to make some headway. And this administration, which is definitively anti-Black. I mean, look, and we'll talk about this again when we get to the Black wealth stats. But there's just no two ways around it. This grouping is specifically focused on damaging Black people, period. Legislatively, economically, politically, with the gerrymandering and all this sort of stuff, the stealing of votes from Black communities, elimination of any kind of healthcare benefits or policies, all this crazy talk about how healthcare is bad and the Obamacare subsidies need to be eliminated, while at the same time granting massive economic subsidies to wealthy white billionaires, a cabinet made up of wealthy. There should be a law. There should be a law against having this many billionaires in a cabinet that's supposed to represent the entire population of the United States of America.
I'm gonna, as we were talking about this, I want to talk about this contract. I talk about it almost every week because as we get to the Black wealth conversation, it'll be, it's always relevant. But in these, like the city of Atlanta, the city of Philadelphia, they're all getting rid of their DBE programs. They're all there now. And personally, I think we should go back to anti-discrimination. I think that's the better way to go after this versus some sort of charitable inclusion kind of nonsense. Like, the idea is that these guys can't give contracts out discriminatorily. But when you're an economist, I know like there are many excellent Black businesses. I don't doubt that. But the number of them that actually get contracts is very, very low. I mean, we're talking less than 0.5% across the board. And I know these guys are trying to make it even worse. But it was bad going in. I mean, like one of the things I've asked you several times is like, what process do we need to have in place for when we finally get through this or whatever, we're going to eventually have to start fighting our way out of this hole? What can we ask for? Because there's no way. I mean, New Jersey, we talk about New Jersey all the time, is 0.14%. That's not almost not even worth fighting for in terms of a structure. I mean, you've got to have a better structure, or else you'll never be able to move forward. So how do how do we justify, or have you written to any of these cities that are getting rid of their DB programs or reached out to them to find out, are they waiting for Black contractors to go to zero? I mean, what's the strategy?
Well, that's a great question. Remember, Black people do not have an industrial policy or strategy. An industrial policy or strategy is one that focuses a population on a particular industry or geography. The way to think about it is to think about what the Indians did in the 1970s in focusing on the computer industry. They said, hey, we're going to focus on creating a boatload of computer software programmers, not hardware, because hardware changes and you need a lot of capital investment. But software creators, you don't need a huge amount of capital investment in order to create. And the demand for that product is going to go through the roof as the industry matures and as the penetration of computers gets into every crevice of the world. So they figured that out in 1970. And look at what they have done. The head of Microsoft, the head of Google, I mean, they hit that exactly right. They focused their population on computer software, and they developed millions of jobs in that, tens of millions of jobs in that area. Black people, on the other hand, our industrial policy strategy involves the NBA and the NFL, industries where there are at most 500 jobs, at most, maybe 400 jobs. I don't know, not a responsible industrial policy. So what you're asking for is, what's the industrial policy that Black people should adopt right now? And I'm actually in the process of writing about that. That's selecting an industry or a geography where we can play a significant role. Let me tie it to my earlier comments about the NBA and the NFL. So if we had a rational industrial policy that even followed up with that, you might say, all right, look, we're still going to stick with that, focusing on those industries. All right. What's the rational industrial policy if you decide to do that? The rational industrial policy is to have a bunch of companies in all areas, all aspects of those two sports. So vendors in the stadiums, parking lot people, TV, radio, video, all of those industries. What you would say is, well, look, since we're the bulk of the labor in those two sports, we're going to insist and demand that we be overrepresented in every ancillary industry and practice that's related to or tied to those two industries. Even that's not great. I mean, that's better than what we currently have. Right. But again, all vendors and all stadiums, having Black representation there. All TV network, or not even the TV networks, but the people who behind the cameras, who are the workers in those technicians, in those areas, sound people, video people, like I say, people that park cars, nothing wrong with that, and a damn thing wrong with that. That's a good job, But if we had a policy where we were overrepresented in all aspects, that's the rational industrial policy. Now, in terms of what our industrial policy should be right now, I have to think about it. I don't know. Software, I still like software. I still think software is a good industry to focus on, especially with AI. We need a Black large language model that we should have given AI. But, that's probably too out there. One of the great things about effective industrial policies, again, looking at what the Indians did, is that there are enough entry points and exit points to have a significant economic impact on your population, on your people. So I'd have to. I like healthcare. I like healthcare as a place where Black minds should focus and concentrate. We have a history of in that area, especially during segregation and Jim Crow, when we couldn't go to white hospitals. So we developed our own, and Charles Drew, Friedman's Hospital, invented blood plasma. So not only do we have a history of outperforming our white counterparts in those industries, but those were solid long-term occupational opportunities. So we'd have to think about, we'd have to go through the list of industries in the United States of America and think about the ones where we could play a significant role and improve the economic condition of the Black population. Again, just as the Indians did when they focused on software in the 1970s. So I'll have to think about that. Maybe construction. I know that we've been focused there, but we know that we face significant competition from low income, low wage workers from Latin America and from other places. That's what impacted us. So those are all, and I'm just a numbers guy. I'm just a numbers guy. Those are all of the types of things that you have to take into account when you create this industrial policy.
So how much of that can be done in the face of clear
hostility?
Clear racial
racism and hostility. How can you do that when people are chasing you down to try to lynch you? Hard to do, it's hard to do, but yes, it can be done. And which gets me back to the other part of the issue. Now, remember, I talked about how our current industrial policy as Black people seems to focus on these two sports. Now, part of the other problem with that industrial policy and that industrial focus is the nature of those sports, super competitive. We don't need to be super competitive. We need to be cooperative and collaborative in a way which we haven't been in 100 years. We don't need to go back to Jim Crow and segregation in order to develop that collaborative mindset.
And then you said we don't need to, but we probably shouldn't, right? I mean, Jim Crow didn't work for us anyway. I mean, Jim Crow was not a successful economic driver.
What do you mean?
For Black people, I mean, Jim Crow did not work for Black people. That's why they worked so hard to get out of it, right? I mean, Black wealth didn't accumulate during Jim Crow.
No, the point was to absolutely eliminate the ability of Black people
that Jim Crow, like people sometimes, well, we just have our own. We've tried that model a bunch of times, and it never, as far as I can tell, unless you got some history I don't have, it's never been successful. It's very hard to do in a place where no one wants you to thrive.
Well, remember, the main negative economic impact of Jim Crow impacted white people. They shot themselves in the foot, by lowering Black income, instead of, so if you lower Black income to 40% of what it should be, that means that, let's say income should be 100,000 and, Black people only have 40,000. That means there's $60,000 in spending that's not occurring that should be occurring, and that's negatively impacting white people. But it does not, because they're the ones that own the means of production and the stores and all this other. They're the ones who are missing out on the sales, Right. But it doesn't matter. That's how
insidious.
That's one word. I was going to use another, but that's how crazy that racial discrimination is. That these people would be willing to damage themselves economically just to keep you and me down. I mean, it's insane. It is literally insane. And again, the best representative of that right now is Donald J. Trump. If you want to see how insane and how stupid that strategy is, just look at that guy. Just absolutely insane. Damaging. And when I say insane, here's what I mean. He's damaging himself. He's damaging his supporters. He's damaging the country. He's damaging the world, right? I can point to the numbers for all of those things. Now, that's just crazy. That's just, it's just insane to have a major policymaker carrying out policies that do all of those things. And again, not exaggerating, not making it up. We can go through them one by one,
I do
So
think there's one thing that it came up. I've talked to a few people, and I always ask this question when I'm going back to government contracting. I'll say to them, especially people who aren't even African Americans, people who aren't African American, but even African Americans say, well, what percentage of contracts do African Americans get? And inevitably, someone says 10 to 20%. I mean, I've never heard, no one's ever said 0.14%. So I do think there is a situation where people believe that a lot of the animus that's driving this is this unrealistic. Like there's someone's purposely juiced the numbers or set out these ideals to drive down, because at 30%, we would be well overrepresented in contracting if we had 30% of contracts, right? I mean, this doesn't make sense. So is it really true that they're trying to hurt themselves, or is that they don't know the reality of the situation? Like they don't, I mean, they don't realize that even if they took everything we had, there would be nothing for them. It was not, there's not enough.
you can't give them the benefit of the doubt. It's the sickness. These are people who are dedicated and devoted to damaging black people. They just hate black people that much, you know. Yeah, so I think that was certainly the case at earlier parts of the minority contracting story. This feeling that black people were getting 20% of all which is just crazy stupid. We're nowhere near that, you know. And part of that has been driven by propaganda on the part of government agencies who want to somehow justify their existence by saying, oh, look, we're giving all of these disadvantaged people contracts. As you and I both know, the people that have benefited from DBE programs have been white women. White women, and that gets to, again, this firm level of racial discrimination. Even when you have programs that are supposed to legitimately even out the business playing field, the people that benefit, the benefits go to the relatives of the people who've been, responsible for some of that disparity. It's diabolical, and it's not an accident either. I mean, this again, as you look at the black wealth numbers, and you see the same disparity in Boston, in Atlanta, in Chicago, in Richmond, every single place you look, it should be clear that this is not this is not accidental. This is deliberate and intentional to lower black wealth.
Do you think part of that intention, and now I want to switch to the black wealth, do you think part of that is the ability, like you said, when you see black people, you only see them doing high-end things. Like you don't see, either they're criminals or they're doing very high-end things. So you don't get a sense of the regular average black person trying to make ends meet. Like it's a very skewed, I guess it's a K, what they call it, the K graph of black income. Do you think that drives a lot of this process? I mean, because it doesn't make sense that they're making this much policy. Again, we know there's no gain, and we know they don't care about the gain. But even if they didn't care about the gain, it's a lot of work to get. I mean, it's just making them. It's like brutalizing people for no value. There's nothing to be had here. So I don't understand.
No. What they get is a certain amount of psychic income, mental income. That they are. You're the one who told me about that LBJ quote that you can empty a poor white man's pockets. If you were to convince him that he's better than the highest status black man, they would pay you for that. Why would they pay you for that? Because they get mental income, psychic income from thinking that they're better than other people. And now here's the other thing. As you and I know, and I've talked about this. Other minority groups get some of that same psychic income, thinking they're better than black Americans. Again, that's a separate conversation. I don't want to get into it right now. That's another conversation for another day. But that's something that we need to discuss, mainly because, as you know, my solution to this issue is radical cooperation and collaboration, like nothing we've ever seen before. We can't cooperate and collaborate now. with these guys coming at us like this, then we're never going to do it, and not just cooperation between and amongst Black people, but also between and amongst other ethnic minority groups. Now that it's a little bit of wishful thinking, I will admit to that. A little bit of kumbaya, sitting around singing kumbaya kind of moment. But I do think that there is a need to have that discussion, have that conversation, try to use some of the new tools, social media tools, to effectuate some of this cooperation and collaboration. I mean, in part, that's kind of what you're doing with this call, with this, I get that. That's why I'm on the call. But we face such headwinds. So, I mean, everything is lined up against us right now.
So, okay, are we going? So let's do the Black for the audience. Let's do the Black wealth going to zero number. So you've written a piece, but you also looked at the data. So we know that article came out 10 years ago. We've been following tracking this for about 10 years between the two of us, just together. You've been on more than one panel to talk about this. Black wealth supposed to go to zero by 2053. Several studies have come out saying that in some places Black wealth is already zero. So lay that out for a little bit. So the data that you do have, lay that out. Just give the audience a thumbnail on that.
So yeah, and this is the document that they're showing on the screen, which is available for download.
Every document we talked about today for the audience is available on there's a link that you can find him on the show. You can download every document that we're discussing. All right, go ahead, Bill.
So, I mean, there've just been a number of studies, Chicago, Atlanta, Boston, New Jersey, that talk about how when you look at the typical white household, they have $200,000, and the typical Black household has zero, So what's going on there? The key there is home ownership. That's absolutely what the key is. And remember, as you pointed out, the GI Bill in the 1940s, 50s really did help to boost Black wealth. And even then, it didn't come up to where it should be, but it was better. It was, and what you've had are systems that have come back into play to remove what little Black wealth there was, and this was deliberate. This was not accidental. This was intentional through the reduction of safeguards on financial institutions. We started with CRA, Community Reinvestment Act, HMDA, Home Mortgage Disclosure Act. People should look these things up. And at the GI Bill, Home Ownership Bill, that actually did give Black people a bit of a leg. We still face headwinds no matter what. But obviously, we removed even those little stepping stones, and then we empowered mainly white, mainly greedy financial institutions to come into the Black neighborhood and extract that wealth back. It's almost as if they were saying, well, hey, Negroes, you only have that money temporarily. That's really my money, and I want it back. Yes. So, looking at reforming the foreclosure courts and the foreclosure process across the country. Again, nothing you can do right now. That there's no way that this economic system would allow you to go in and reform foreclosure in any meaningful way.
Yeah.
But that's part of what you would need to do. You'd like to have Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, which are housing finance agencies, refocus on Black home ownership, something that, to their credit, the Biden administration was beginning to do. And even Obama had taken a look at, although Obama messed up when he didn't penalize the financial institutions after the 2008 financial crisis. That's a whole nother story as to
why. Also, 10 million people lost their houses and nobody went to jail. So
nobody went to jail. Except, well, there was one Black guy who went to jail, but that was it. The only banker who went to jail was a Black guy. Now, since we know that the financial institutions and the regulatory structure in place now will not do anything to repair the damage, again, what that means is that we got to do it ourselves. Radical cooperation, collaboration, looking at using digital currency. I'm a big fan of Bitcoin and have been since 2012, 2010. Looking at ways that we can repair some of this damage ourselves, because we certainly know that the federal government is not going to do anything to help. In point of fact, they're going to do things that lead to a reduction in Black wealth because they're that racist, they're that evil. Some state and local governments. We talked about the number of states and localities that have gotten rid of their disadvantaged business programs. I think you pointed out there's something like 30 cities that have gotten rid. So we know that those programs are under pressure as well. So that's not a life raft. That boat has sunk. So that means that we've got to figure out something to do on our own. Difficult though that is, and again, I'm not underestimating the difficulty factor at all. I understand how difficult this is, but
I always point to those women in Georgia who gave out those scholarships when I talk about how difficult it is to do something on your own. They perfectly willing not to take any money from the big investment institutions for their women. Had 10 scholarships set up and they were sued not to do that. So I don't, when you say it's a Herculean task, I mean, Hercules should have it so easy. I mean, we're talking about, they won't let you breathe. Every time you turn, they're suffocating you. But
so looking, even though we've talked about the states and localities that have gotten rid of their DBE programs, I would say
with the DBE, Black contractor was still less than 1% with the programs.
Even with the programs, I mean, useless, meaningless, but even with that, I would say targeting some states, California, New York, Illinois, for work on reparative home ownership, new types of funds, new digital currency-based types of approaches. I think that there are some things that can be done there. But here's the other thing. I certainly wouldn't be crowing about any victories in those areas. I keep it very quiet.
Don't put it on your LinkedIn. Don't put it on your LinkedIn or your Facebook.
You know what I'm saying? We have been working on trying to get here. I'll put this one in the chat room as well. As you know, we've been trying to focus on LA. And the LA wildfires.
Altadena.
Looking at ways that we could, let me put this in the chat. There you go. Looking at ways where we could create a fund designed to repair some of the damage done to Black homeowners in the Altadena wildfire. And we continue to work on that. So there are things, but it's just very, very difficult. You just got to keep at it. It's very, very difficult to get the type of support from institutional entities that state governments, local governments.
We're gonna circle back to like that part of this, but I want to hit two more points before, because I do want to every time I always tell people that they have to work hard, and people, you work as hard as anybody in this space, and then talk about dedication. You've been dedicated to a very long time, so I do want to tie that in. But we just talked about the Black wealth going to zero, and for you guys to know, we have a compendium of all these articles that's available on the line that Tracy has available online as well for you guys to look at. But we're talking about disparate impact and the rules and what this government's doing. You're doing comments, I believe, on the CFPB rulemaking on disparate outcomes, right, and lending. You want to talk just a little briefly about what that looks like, what's going on with the CFPB? And CFPB is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, for those who understand.
Right. CFPB was the one entity that was supposed to redress a lot of the damage that had been imposed on the population by the financial institutions and financial institution policies leading up to and going through the financial crisis of 2008, 2006, 2008. So these guys were supposed to represent consumers and in their stance relative to financial institutions. And they started to do a relatively good job. I mean, they were okay. As you know, I complained about them because they didn't have a lot of, same thing, didn't have a lot of black contractors, didn't have a huge amount of black, they had a couple of token black employees, but, didn't have a lot. And then the door shut. And now the current administration is attempting to shut them down. Not attempting, has actually been effective in shutting them down. Now, part of what CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, did was they re-energized a focus on anti-discriminatory housing finance policies. They looked at the behavior of large financial institutions and small financial institutions and tried to determine if they were either intentionally or unintentionally discriminating against Black people. And they actually, under Biden, they actually were very active. They fined some banks and they put into place some policies that would, over time, lead to higher Black homeownership rates. Obviously, we know that that is anathema to the current administration. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to see it. They have this weird, this crazy kind of approach that if you repair the damage done to Black people, that somehow you're discriminating against white people. So, we know that this was a failure, by the way, of the Black bar to counter that argument. With the minute that popped up, lawyers should have been all over the place suing people over that. At any rate, the CFPB has put it up for comment a certain rule that would allow them, that we think allows them to get away with not enforcing anti-racist discriminatory housing lending laws. So they basically will say, well, we don't know if that bank was intentionally discriminating against you. Therefore, it's not discrimination. Therefore, we're going to let it slide. And that obviously
loans with the Black people is just an accident of history. It has nothing to do with racial discrimination.
And we know, because of the data that we just went through on Black home ownership and Black wealth, we know that they were never really effectively regulated in the first place when it came to discrimination against Black people. Now, discrimination against other groups, sure, they actually, there was more effort put around that. But we know, because of the Black wealth numbers, we know that these financial institutions were never really held to account. So what this means is that they're definitely not going to be held to account now. If you think the Black wealth gap is bad now, give it a couple of years with these guys, and I'm convinced it's going to be negative. Black people will wind up owing white people money. That's actually what I think is. That's where I think they're going to go.
Zero's optimistic. Zero is an optimistic number in your scenario?
Zero is an optimistic number. I mean, you're going to wind up where you have a negative Black-white wealth gap in Chicago, where Black people owe white people $10,000 on average. Just because of how insane and racist and bigoted the policies coming out of this administration are. I mean, you see what they're doing. This is. I mean, again, unfortunately, there are not a lot of effective approaches that would counter a lot of this activity, a lot of these policies. But my hope is that people on this call will at least start to pay attention, maybe think about filing some lawsuits, filing some complaints, filing some comments, to start to try to reverse some of these issues.
So that takes me to my final point, which is the Bloomberg charter schools to high school to HBCU pipeline. And I thought it was interesting. You and I talked about this a little bit. Like it's resegregation is resegregating the world, right? I mean, it's like when during Iraq Civil War they built all these black schools for colleges for black people to go, so they wouldn't have to go to white schools. Now we've got this whole situation where it looks like they're redoing that. So with all of this, with the black wealth numbers, everything, are we at the final sort of the end game of total resegregation? I mean, the
Well,
Voting Rights Act.
Well, firstly, let's go over what is it that Bloomberg is doing. And firstly, who is Bloomberg? Bloomberg is Michael Bloomberg,
Yeah.
former mayor of New York, owner of Bloomberg. As you know, my thing with Michael Bloomberg is back in the day, I wrote a memo which talked about the utilization of computer technologies to manage investment portfolios that wound up in the hands of one Michael J. Bloomberg. And was a fact. I'm not saying that, I came up with the idea from Bloomberg. I'm just saying that, early on, a lot of the research that looked at, the use of computer technology to price securities was something that, I had a hand in, Obviously, he took it ran with it. So Michael J. Bloomberg wants to fund charter schools, which are schools that are outside of the public school systems, and he wants to provide scholarships for black kids who go to charter schools to then go to HBCUs. So, as I understand your question, well, why are you funding them to go to HBCUs? Why don't you fund them to go to Harvard or Mississippi State or someplace like that? Instead, you want to focus on HBCUs. I do not think it's resegregation, Kevin. I understand. There we go. Commits 20, and it's only 20 million. Good grief. This guy blows 20 million on a Christmas party. Yeah. So,
it's a double, to me, it's doubly bad. One, it's not much money. And two, the outcome, if he was successful, the outcomes would be, there would be no, with all the affirmative action rulings. I mean, if you just take the whole thing, it's like resegregation. I don't know how else to say.
I get it. I think that there's reason to watch it and reason to be concerned about the thing. Obviously, he would claim that he's trying to do the right thing, that his intentions are good, but this is part of the problem with having billionaires, with all this money that are influencing public policy. They might think that they're doing a good job, and at the end of the day, might cause more problems than they solve. And then, he's never going to know it. He's going to be off somewhere when this, if you're correct, resegregates the educational system of the country. Or again, you might say, well, why is this guy? How about sending black students to Jewish schools? How about that? Why don't we do that? No, he doesn't want to do that.
Shabbat, they plan for, instead of just doing charter schools, giving them money to go to Jewish schools, right, or Catholic schools, right,
or Catholics and whatever. No, he wants to do this. So it's part of that weirdness that these people have. They think they can solve every problem with money, and that the world should thank them for taking a little $20 million and devoting it to charter schools and HBCUs. No, I have issues with it in general, but I'm not as worried about resegregation as you are. I don't think resegregation is a problem. I think that absolute out and out discrimination against black people is going to be the issue. Just the decline in the number of black people going to college in general, and specifically black women.
Well, I guess if you taken out of context, maybe this doesn't seem as bad. But if you add it to all the other contextual things we're talking about, or all the other pieces, it's like part of a chess, of like a large chess game, right? I mean, if you think about that, they got rid of voting rights. They're about to say that you can't, the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act doesn't apply, so that all those black congressional seats that got created after the '86 lawsuit goal. I mean, so I don't know what if that's not resegregation. I'm not sure I understand what segregation is. I mean, because all these pieces are coming together. Like,
Well, that's a separate issue. I mean,
yeah,
talk
I think
about
they're all
the.
one thing. So I think
No,
it's
I
about one.
understand. I understand where you come. I mean, I think you should talk about all these seats going away. In Congress, in terms of what the number is now versus what it will be once all of this gerrymandering has been put into place. You're exactly right. I mean, what's the number? It's going from 54 representatives to 20 or something.
So if you in '86, before the '92, so after the '90 redistricting, they went from like 20 or 25 black members of Congress in 1990. Then the '92, that big surge. So 20 is sort of the bottom line threshold number that existed before they started doing the packing and unpacking of districts after the '86 ruling. So
So you're saying they're going from what? What is it now?
potentially it's 60 right now. So potentially you go back to about 20,
To
25.
about 20. Jesus Louise.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that is, I'm far more concerned about that, than literally anything else. These people, I mean, it took us forever to even get that kind of representation,
Yeah.
and they've come up with a way to deny us.
And that's why I think it's all part of the same game. I mean,
I hear you. I hear you. I don't necessarily disagree with that. Again, lack of wealth, lack of home ownership, lack of health care, lack of political representation, reversal, actually, of political representation, lack
reversal
of
education, reversal of education opportunities.
Education, reversal of business creation opportunities, and business financing opportunities, claiming that there's some that no, it's you well know. I think it's bad. I think it's really bad. Again, other than radical cooperation and collaboration, I don't know how we get out of this. I'm not optimistic. Let me put it like this. As you well know, I am not optimistic. What time is it? 8:58. Yeah, we got 2 minutes. So I'm comfortable saying, right before I get off, that we've got to roll up our sleeves and develop some new ways.
So I'm gonna take the last 2 minutes because you do a lot of stuff, and people are like, you write op-eds, but you send in letters of comment. You do amicus briefs. Like you said, no one. All these things are going on, and no black people are suing. Right? I mean, like literally, they're getting rid of the DBE programs. No one's suing. They're getting rid of. We lost. They got rid of affirmative action at Harvard. Right? That was a lawsuit. None of the black Harvard alum, as far as I know, maybe you see something I didn't, never filed a single amicus brief, didn't write an op-ed in opposition, didn't even like raise their head. So I'm not sure, like, where does this come from? Like, you work with a lot of the business groups. Where are they in all of this stuff? I mean, literally, they're taking away the 0.14% of contracts they have. They're taking those away, and they're just sitting around. Like, what is that?
Well, some of the business groups and some of the business entities are sticking with us and sticking with the DEI, regardless of what this guy says. They are maintaining. Others, like Disney and AT&T, have succumbed to some of the only the Hispanics are suing. That's probably right. That's probably right. Some of the other groupings are kowtowing to the pressure. And if you talk to them, they say, well, we're doing it because we think that this is eventually going to go away. It's like the whole renaming of your DEI program. Well, we're going to rename it so that we can get out from under this pressure. I think that's cowardly. I don't think that's the way to go about it. But
and it's like it's also like admitting that something's wrong with your DEI program, right?
And I'm not AT&T, and I'm not trying to do a merger and having these guys say, hey, you got to, not only do you have to get rid of your DEI program, you got to announce it.
But that comes back to my point that none of the black business people are making themselves. I mean, AT&T, this is an adversarial process. AT&T's got to do what they, but we're not raising. You and I are the only ones having this conversation. Like, I mean, I haven't. No one else has gone on publicly and said, "Hey, this is wrong." Right? I mean, no one's suing or fighting contracts. I just don't understand what the nature of all this is.
Well, they're scared. They're scared. They're greedy. They're selfish. I mean, a lot of the program managers, a lot of the entities, they've done pretty well over the years, and it's just the uncertainty. Unless now, here's the other thing. I could be wrong. There might be a lot of stuff going on in background that I have no knowledge of, where these corporation entities and others are fighting hard to protect or to maintain or do something with DEI, at least to make sure they get the benefits of DEI. But we'll have to see.
It's a well-kept secret, and they're losing. If that's the case.
If they are, it's a. But it could be.
Well, we went over a little bit, Bill. Thanks for doing this, and thank all of you guys for listening in. And we'll keep having this conversation. There's nothing else to do but keep complaining. And so, thank you. Good night.